The book has a whole chapter on female infanticide. She has done an excellent job of historically documenting what other things happened in different cultures. We have the earliest evidence in Greece, killing female infants, cast away. They were cast away. Ancient Rome has it. England, for a long time, in the early 17th, 18th century, especially in agricultural communities, female infants were killed. Japan has it, but Japan was not gender specific. In Japan is the only culture where infants were neglected or left to die because they were deformed or they have some birth defects. China, of course, Valerie has a lot of data on this. Colonial India, 1870, they instituted this Female Infanticide Prevention Act. So there is a whole range of historical work looking at why this has been a case. Korea, people have done looking at the sex ratios. Most of the work has been done by two kind of researchers, historians looking at why this particular culture has extreme sun preference, which is leading to the neglect of. This is one of the quote. The letter a soldier writes to his wife who was pregnant by the time he left. I ask and beg you to take good care of our baby son. If you are delivered of a child, if it is a boy, keep it. If it is a girl, discard it. This is 1st century BC, right? This is one of the oldest document of we know of female neglect, right? So 1870 Act came through this story. It's more an apocryphal story, but it's a very important story for you to know. He's a British colonial officer. So he is James Jackson went to Punjab, which has a long history of female neglect. He went to the villages. He wanted to impress one of the villagers to speak in Hindi and Punjabi. So he, in a broken Punjabi, he was telling, I met so-and-so, who is your friend? Instead of saying, who is your friend, he mistakenly said, who is your son-in-law? So everybody laughed because they said, this person cannot be my son-in-law because there are no girls in the village. So the whole colonial government started this protection. Oh, they are killing babies, so we have to protect them. In 1870, they come up with this act, Prevention of Female Infanticide. So the colonial government put a lot of resources and energy, and they wrote a lot about in London newspapers and how the Indians are killing their daughters, so on and so forth. And what they did was they come up with a plan. So each village will be counted. They will count the number of girls in each village every year. So if there are not enough daughters in the village, they find the village chief, right? So it went on for a few years. After a few years, then the villagers know how to beat the system. They smuggle girls from the neighboring villages for the head count, right? So the policy implications are quite intact because it's the cultural issues are very different, and they try to impose something from the top. Okay, this is the latest issue because this is from the Bangladesh woman who gave birth to twins, and right after the babies were born, the mother-in-law took the girl, and she was raised by her, whereas the boy was nursed by the mother. So after 6 weeks after the baby died, so the UNICEF started a campaign to save daughters because this is one of the telling pictures where it shows, there is really clear example of female neglect leading to infanticide. So it started the whole project looking at South Asian culture, why South Asian countries have this enormous sex ratio question where there are more males than females. By default, by nature, if you notice, there should be more males conceived because male fetuses are always at risk. So by nature and the average, everything being equal, you should have more number of male fetus should be conceived because they are likely to die because they are at risk. So many of you may know where India is. Sometimes I also show a map where I did this work. So I'm from South India. Most of my work is done here, and some of my work is done in Punjab, which is the northern part of India. These are the two states have sex ratios, documented sex ratios with a very high number of males, disproportionate number of males, right? Okay, these are the areas where I conduct my studies. These studies have in the range from 600 to 750. These are the sex ratios in the villages. These are the number of girls per every 1,000 boys. So it ranges from 614 to 750. So there are about 1.66 men for every woman in these villages. This is based on 1990 census data. 2000 census data, things did not change. You have pretty much similar pattern. Maybe in some cases it got worse, especially in Punjab. Sorry, got the wrong button. Okay, this is the sex ratio questions. If you look at this, these are the village level data. If you look at the village level data, you look at 614 girls per 1,000 boys, 771. This is one particular region in my state. Remember, it's only one, maybe 2 or 3 districts, but it's not the case with all the other places, right? This is the primary healthcare data. So this is what the government data, which shows why the causes of infant death, right? So you have all the natural causes, respiratory problem, diarrhea, fever. Then there's a class, the last bottom line called social causes. This is the government designated cause called social causes because they can write female neglect or infanticide. If you look at this column, there is not much difference for the natural causes, 3 out of 4, 14 to 1. But when you come to social causes, for every 5 male infant deaths, there were 28 female infant. For every 11, there were 72. For every 3, there are 51. That is 17 times more likely to die if you are a girl in that village, right? So this really started a huge uproar, and people said, so the government has to do something about it. A lot of people went to the villages, studied these villages. News media covered it. It's a very tough time. Then people went and studied them, Venkatachalam and Srinivasan. What they did was they actually went and talked to the midwives and found out what are the ways the method they use to kill the infants. Most of the infants are killed within 24 hours if they were killed. Or there is sex-selective abortion. That is, you have female fetus, you do the test. When the moment you know the gender, then you decide to have an abortion. So female feticide, they call it female feticide. So they give some of the herbal medicines that kill. They also use boiled water with paddy, which is rice with husk in it. So these are all tobacco paste, all those very indigenous methods to use to kill the infant. Most of the time the mother doesn't know because she was tired or she was drugged by the time the child dies. They never kill the firstborn. The firstborn girls are always saved because no child is better than a child. So they always have the firstborn. So we have interviewed a number of firstborn girls. So I think there's a number of methods that have been used and people talked about it. And it was quite an interesting time because we also have a very high number of women activists, highly educated women in India. So they involved in so many interventions. They did street theater. I used to do when I was an activist in India. I used to be in family planning programs. We were teaching safe sex practices. So we used to do a lot of street theater, domestic violence issues. It's a very issue-based theater. It's mostly started in Latin American countries. If you know Paulo Freire, some generation might know, Augusto Boal. So they did street theater. What they do is you go to a community, so you don't need a stage because most of the time we didn't have any money for it. So you go and collect people, and you bring them all together, and you ask them what the problem you have. So you can say, well, this community has a problem of, let's say, domestic violence. So we come up with some scenarios where there is some conflict between husband and wife, and we will enact the scene, and we will ask the community, what do you think the protagonist should do? So the street theater movement used these sort of vignettes to provoke some discussion, and the community will come up with solutions and discussions about why we are doing this, why we should not do this. So they use the street theater to talk about a woman who wants to have an abortion because she found out she has a female child. They will start a discussion. And they also found out how this women's empowerment program, so they really created a lot of jobs for women in these areas. So by creating jobs, if women are empowered, they are likely to invest on their daughters more, right? This is another, an economic solution. They also found out what are the babies. So you need to do something long-term, but you also do something immediate. The immediate thing is, we know based on the research that is, if the family the mother has already have 2 daughters, and she's pregnant, and we know she's pregnant with the daughter, it's very highly, the child is at risk because they're likely to kill the baby. So what they did was they come up with a program where they assigned a social worker during the second term or third trimester. So she will be with the mother. So the baby is protected, right? It's very expensive, but an important intervention. They did that. So they identify babies at risk based on the birth order. The birth order is an important thing. If there are 2 daughters the family already have, third born daughters you will not see. Fourth born daughter I never met in my entire field work, right? So it's this particular generation. Counseling, we are not a very well developed. So if you know India, so you make a phone call, it goes to Sears, and Sears go to India. Somebody's answering your questions, right? They'll say Susan or Michael, John, whoever is. All those Johns, they're all very good in engineering and medicine, but nobody is doing anything in psychology. So social science is not a very developed field. So we're actually trying to help how to do in counseling and how to intervene. So these are all things came, and the government started a scheme. So what they did was government came up with 2 schemes. One is we will give money, so they give cash incentive. So you can, they said we will put $5,000 rupees, which is about $110 at that time, 1992 I'm talking about. Then it will be on a fixed deposit, like a CD, right? It will be on a number of years. Each milestone the child reaches, so the moment she finishes elementary school, middle school, high school, so they will give them some incentive. And by the time she reaches her marriageable age, and they will have about 20 to 30,000 rupees, which is a lot of money. They can use the money for marriage. Basically what the government did was, so we will pay the dowry if you keep the daughter, right? So that's an interesting solution. So this is, by the way, the solution was originally proposed by Napoleon. Napoleon did this. He saved a lot of babies because they were killed. And he was the first person who organized this Save the Baby scheme. Very interesting French connection there. So then, based on the Napoleon idea, they all come up with the cradle baby scheme. That means each village had a cradle. So you can leave the baby. If you don't want the baby, you can leave the child, and the state will take it to an orphanage or find adoptive parents, right? So you can leave the administrative offices in a cradle. Nobody asks any questions. They also try to give some financial incentives. The incentives I talked about before. You have a number of ways we can help you, her education. We can help her to get on her feet and for her marriage, right? So these are the schemes started by the government. And so that's very highly publicized and important. The chief minister came, governor came, all kinds of stuff. Interestingly, by the way, this scheme was started by our first chief minister we had, who was a woman. So it's not a coincidence. A woman chief minister took care of these issues. Okay, so this is, again, they give the whole set of benchmarks. When the child meets those benchmarks, she gets the family was rewarded for that. Okay, so what happens? So how successful? The next question is, after 10 years, what happened to this? Well, there was some partial success. They saved about 126 babies. A lot of them were given for adoption. And they couldn't find 10 babies, so we were talking about what happened to those 10 babies under the state care. State is not very good in maintaining these sort of issues, right? In taking care of babies, because they can't run orphanages. Then people then they talk to the community, right? As usual, it was started by a bureaucrat, right? They come up with this nice idea. They wanted to implement. Oh, we will put a cradle in each village, right? Right. They didn't look at all the logistics. One of the major logistics was the cradle was outside the village administrative office. The village administrative office is closed by 5 o'clock, so nobody will be there after 5. The woman wants to drop the baby. If they are going to do in the night, there was nobody there. They have to take a bus, go to the city, the county office, which is open, because they have understaffed. The local staff office is understaffed. So, I mean, who is going to take all this thing? So they didn't even look into those issues. When you talk to the villagers, they'll say, oh, they are closed on weekends, right? That is another thing. So all these logistical issues were not worked out. So that also partly contribute to the level of success they had. They also didn't trust the government. So I'm going to give my child to the government, and the government is going to really take care of my child. Is it going to be the case? So they want to know how the government is going to implement this program, number one. Number two, if you are going to give the financial incentive, will the subsequent government continue the program? Because there were a lot of politics. The new regime will not see this as a legitimate program because it was started by the predecessor, right? And lo and behold, it happened. After next election, she lost the election. So the new government came, and they cut off all the incentives for this program. They cut the staff for the program. And whatever the villagers were suspicious of the government, whatever the suspicions came true. And again, this is another thing. Then they also felt the child will grow up and come back to them. So there is a lot of shame and honor involved. So I would rather kill my child than going through this. So the government didn't really incorporate the culture-specific issues. Or, as a psychologist, I would call, you need to understand the psychology behind the practice. Instead of simply saying, these are the issues, I'm going to give you the solution, and this is how it's going to work. And, of course, the people are more suspicious, and they have legitimate reasons why they think it's an issue. Okay, so you may ask why they don't want daughters. So people have given several options, several proposals. So I'm going to list all the proposals and go through all of them. Then we can come back to the main issues. First, religion. So a lot of people said Hinduism provide a lot of power to the sun. Sun is supposed to perform all the rituals. When you're dead, he's supposed to perform the ritual. So you need to have son who to take care of your all the death rituals. So daughters cannot perform. Investment. It's very expensive. Daughters are expensive because you have to pay the dowry. And after your marriage, you go to your husband's house. It's a patrilineal system. The woman leaves her home and go and live with her husband's family, which is typical. So the sons take care of their parents. So it's like an old age protection. It's like a social security. You have a pension scheme. So the sons will take care of you. The more sons you have, they're likely to take care of you. Hypergeny is another thing. Hypergeny is, how many of you knew the term hypergeny? Anybody knew? Of course, anthropologists would know. Hypergeny is the sort of the cultural tendency to, it's generally true in the U.S. If you look at the evolutionary psychologists, they have found this pattern too. Women are likely to marry up, right? Women are likely to find a mate who is equal status or above them, right? So they want to move up. So if you want to move up, that means you have to pay more dowry. So this is something the families struggle with. So this is a very universal phenomenon. It has a particular issue in this. What I found was, I also found the female neglect is not a widespread phenomenon. It's restricted to, it's particularly confined to few areas. And one is an agricultural caste group. It happens only in two caste groups predominantly, and two areas in South and few places in Punjab. The agricultural community like to have more sons. Why? Anybody? Any guess? Why? If you're a farmer, why you need daughters? Inheritance, right? So this was not far back. If you look at Italian families, early 20th century, if you have three sons in Italian family, the joke is the oldest son get the land, second son go to the military, third son become a priest, right? So it's the division of labor and who gets the property, right? For a long time, this is how the lineage plays a very important role. Even if you look at the U.S., the farmers have a difficult time getting married. Have you seen the movie Sarah Plain and Tall? Right. So that's a mail-order bride, right? So that's, again, the farmer couldn't find a bride. So the agricultural communities have a surplus of male because they are supposed to take care of the land. So I think that's sort of an issue for a long time. So when the inheritance is patrilineal, because you have land, if I have more daughters, I have to divide the land and pay dowry. So the land becomes smaller and smaller. The smaller your land holding, your power in the community goes down, and the land value goes down. So it's very important for you to hold the land together. So even in communities where they have more sons, not all sons got married. Right? It's very interesting ethnographic information. So when women contribute fewer resources, and that's also an ecological factor, that is, if women are not going to plow the field, right? So these are all the ecological factors which put women in a disadvantageous position, right? And lo and behold, the community which has this, there are two communities that have committed female infanticide predominantly, or female neglect, sex-selective abortion right now. One is an agricultural community. Other one is, this is the Gounders, who are the agricultural community. The other one is honor culture. They used to be pastoralist, but they are also serving the army. If you look at it in pastoral communities, that's called culture of honor, right? In culture of honor, in honor cultures, men are supposed to show their masculinity, and they have to protect the honor of the women, right? So most of the southern cultures have this. If you look at the South, there is some interesting work by Dick Nisbet in southern U.S. southern culture. There's a huge difference in U.S. southern culture. What he found was you bring southerners who are like you guys, college students. You bring them, they come to Michigan from South, from Georgia or Atlanta. He brought them to a lab. When they come to the lab, they'll say, we are going to do a test about, you are going to taste some of these things. We are going to collect some saliva samples. The unsuspecting undergraduates come to the lab. When they come to the lab, before they enter the lab, there will be a small pathway. They already set up a 300-pound man who is about so big, and he walks, and you cannot step in. He has to step out for you to come back. So he actually brushes you and walks by, and they have a camera capturing this whole interaction. Southerners typically, who are bumped by this guy accidentally, their testosterone level goes up compared to Northerners. I'm talking about the study done 5 years back. So the honor culture is very important because they have a low tolerance for insult, right? So those honor cultures have a very long tradition. For example, if you go to Alabama and Georgia, after 12 o'clock midnight, if you entered anybody's house, he can get shot. That's legal. You don't even have to be prosecuted. So they have changed the law very recently. And to hold the temporary insanity, if I found my wife in bed with another man, I can kill the man. So, Stanford White and Harry Thaw, a nice movie called Ragtime, opening scene, you saw this. This man went to a ball and killed this man. He was acquitted in Southern court again. So I think this is, so the honor culture is very important. All cultures have this. Not all cultures have a practice of female infanticide, but there's a strong correlation between honor culture and female neglect. So it was a very common issue in Middle Eastern countries. When Prophet Muhammad wrote, he actually said you should not kill female infanticide. That's one passage in Quran which says don't kill female infants. Right? It was a practice before. So I think the honor culture, this community has a history of killing daughters because daughters bring shame. It's high risk. If something happened to the man, who is going to protect the honor, right? The suicide rate is very high among these women because honor is very important. Gownders have a history of committing female infanticide because it's connected to resource question. So this group commit female infanticide or female neglect because they really think it's going to take the land away. They don't want the resource to be drained. And this is a culture of honor groups. So that leads to this. They live, the interesting thing is both communities live about 50 miles apart. They have a completely different set of reasons, the way they think about gender. Right? But the issue is no one has looked at it because everybody looked at the aggregate data. If you do Google, right? If you do Google female infanticide, who is thinking the highest number of hits you're going to get? Can anybody guess? I can give $10, $50. Who is going to host these sites? Anti-abortion groups. All the female infanticide information, if you do Google, this will go to all the anti-abortion sites. It's very interesting who is holding these issues in bringing to the U.S. Right? Okay. So I want to really see, is it true? I've been telling you guys are, listen to me politely because I'm an Indian, I must know something about India, and so I want to know. The proof for the pudding is in the data, right? So I want to really check whether this is true. So I want to check whether Gownders and Tavers are doing this for this reason. Is there any way you can test this? So as a psychologist, when I present this sort of work, so psychologists want to know how it is true, and is there any evidence, at least from attitude data, what you can do. So I had Brahmins, who is the other caste group, which is another interesting caste group because they are the uppermost caste in this caste hierarchy, and they pay the highest amount of dowry. The whole thing started with that observation for me because if dowry is an issue, Brahmins should kill their daughters more than anybody else. But historically, that's the only caste group doesn't have any history of female infanticide. So if that's an issue, so that should work. So I want to really check the ecological relationship. So what I did was I looked at, before I go, there are two kind of people who have looked at it. One is the empowerment issue. One is women's education is going to lead to power. Women are not valued because they have low status. This is sort of this is the government policy. They actually look at the women's empowerment. That's the relationship they look at it. So I want to look at the ecological aspects. So what I want to do is I went and looked at, I gave them, what typically psychologists do. You tell them a story, you ask them what do you think about it, and they respond to this. So the first study I did was, I want to look at, is there any difference between, is there a resource allocation bias? First of all, governors and Tevers, are they significantly different from Brahmins in the way they think about resources? And also think about insult and culture of honor. Is there a strong presence of culture of honor among Tevers, which sort of correlate to the practice of female neglect? And how these things will work. I also want to know what happens if your daughter marries somebody from the lowest caste, and how these two groups talk about it. So I did a whole bunch of field studies. I'm going to present you some data which show how the caste groups think about it. First thing was a moral reasoning task. So I presented a moral dilemma. Here is a mom. She is going on a picnic with her daughter and son, and there is an accident, and she could only save one life. This is the closest I could ask them about female infanticide. I never asked them anything about female infanticide in my field research for 5-6 years. That's the only time I asked them. So who would you save? I want to first find out whether this group really significantly, more likely to save the son compared to Brahmins. I also want to know the resource allocation task. I want to say, here's the son and daughter, how are you going to divide the land, right? First thing. Then I also want to look at attitude towards insults. That's sort of spousal infidelity. That's sort of a work Dignisper did with the Southerners in the U.S. So it was collected in a community sample. It was all done in Tamil. I trained local informants to do the study, and they did the work. A lot of them didn't know the hypothesis because none of them are psychology majors. They all have degree in engineering. Some of them couldn't find a job. They worked with me as a research assistant. Some of them are chemistry majors. So there's no way they know what I was doing. The life-saving situation, there is a total of N of 715. There are 239 Brahmins, Governors and Tevers, 476. The first question, this is the moral dilemma. There's a boat accident. You can only save one child. You can swim with one child. Which child you will save, son or daughter? As you can see, I just put both Tevers and Governors together. So they said highest number of, there's a significant difference between them. 80% of them said they will save the son, not the daughter. And this is Brahmin. Still, they said that they will save the son, but not as strongly as Tevers and Governors are. Then I also asked them, why do you do this? So they have this must have son because he's a descent. Basically, they think the family lineage lies with the son, not with the daughter. This is one of the justifications. Must save the son because you need the son to look after the family in future, and daughter goes to another house. Basically, it's a future protection, right? Investment. Women always like male children. Of course, all men said that, right? So this is only one woman said that. So in the entire sample, so that's 11%. All men. So men said, "Oh, moms always like sons," so which was cute. But I think this is the first time actually we have data why they actually like sons, right? So far, even the government data doesn't really. This is the only data I could find, in my opinion. Then I also control for education, income level, all these things. There is no, irrespective of education, income level, strong son preference exists among Tevers and Governors. One of the major reasons is progeny, that they really think the property and family lineage stays with the son, not with the daughter, which is one of my predictions, which is the reason they do it. They also view daughter as she's going to somebody else's family, so she's going to move away from us. The second thing was, you have a son and daughter, you have 80 acres of land, how you're going to divide the land between sons and daughters. If I give this task to my undergraduate students, they'll say, what is the most number of, all equal, right? So the great American parenting mythology or parenting goal is you are equal. You treat all your sons and daughters equal. So it's very important. So distribute land equally. Son should get more land or all land. Daughter should get more or all land. These are the options we gave. Like you find, so the Brahmins said equal, more likely, they said, more number of Brahmins said there should be equal distribution. Both these groups said equal distribution because, none of them said for daughter, right? They said land should go either equal distribution or all land should go to son, right? And this Gounders and Devers both said this. There is not much difference between these two groups. So I thought maybe they are doing it because there is social desirability. So I'm testing them. They're saying this. So maybe, it's so blatant. So I gave this second task where I said, here is a patriarch who has two sons. One son has 3 daughters. Other son has 3 sons. And he has 100 acres of land and equal value in cash. So somebody can take the cash, somebody can take the land. Who should get the land? Who should get this cash? Because it's equal distribution. So now you're going to choose which resource you're going to use. So we want to check: give the land to the son with male offspring, or give the land to the son with female offspring, right? So if you give the land to the son who has more female offspring, the land will go eventually to outgroup, right? Lo and behold, as he said, both groups said, "Oh my God, the land should go to the son who has sons." So when you kind of balance it, the resource question, they're equal value, and it should go to this, and they said it should go to this. And there's not much difference for Brahmins. So in a sense, these two caste groups are different from the other Brahmin caste in terms of how they think of resources, right? So land to son with sons. So the land should go to the sons, and this is the males and females within each group. There's no gender difference basically. Tevers also said land should go to the sons with. So I mean, if there is an immovable property, that should go to the son. Who has more sons? Not only the son. If you have more sons, it also plays an important role in the decision making in the family resource allocations. Questions? Should I go? Okay, so this shows how the ecological factors play an important role in the decision making. One of my surprise was I didn't find a lot of difference between Tevers and Gounders, which I was expecting, at least in the resource allocation. Then I went and talked to people, economists, developmental economists in the area. What they told me was, for a long time, Tevers were the warrior caste. And in 1960s, one of the Tevar caste member became a senator. So he built a dam in that area, which irrigated a lot of land. All of a sudden, this caste group, which has a history of pastoralist history, all of a sudden have land, which is of some value. So they started imitating Gounders' practices. Already in the community, there is sort of a preference for sons for a different ecological reason. On top of it, now they are acting exactly like Gounders. So that means a newly emerging land-owning group also imitate the practice of the land-owning group. And they already have a son preference to start with. So I want to look at culture of honor. So I gave them 4 different kinds of insult. Somebody insults you in a public place. Somebody says bad things about your mom, insults you. And somebody says insult your village. All the people from your town are like this. Then the caste insult. Somebody insults your caste. This is the culture of honor task. What I did was, there are 4 insults, and there is a protagonist who acted violently. He couldn't tolerate the insult. And how much you think what the protagonist did is right? That was the question. The more he sympathizes with you, the more likely to, I thought the honor group will sympathize with the protagonist more. And I also used that to predict how this will predict attitude towards spousal infidelity, right? There is always an asymmetry, right? If a man is cheating on his wife versus a woman cheating on his wife cheating on the husband, right? Even in the U.S., there is slightly tolerant of the male infidelity compared to female infidelity. But I would expect the male infidelity, the honor should predict this. So this is the task I gave. So female infidelity was viewed more negatively than male infidelity. People thought, she should be killed because she was cheating on the husband. Not, but less likely to say the same thing when the man is doing it. Of course, the honor group has a much stronger tendency to do that. So that is an interesting way the ecological context play a role in the way they think about gender. This is the infidelity question. As you could say, the oppositions, they think wife catch husband cheating. This is more tolerant. The lower the score, the less tolerant you are. The lower the score, the people actually across all caste groups, they said women should not cheat on their husband compared to male. That was the main effect for the story type. Right. Then we also used this to find, wrong direction. It also predicted violence against women. So how this insult, as a composite score, does it predict violence against women? That was only predict for Gounder man, and Thever male. So Thever males was the strongest. This is the strongest relationship, controlling for socioeconomic status, income, education level, right? So the honor culture, we really felt insults are, you stand up for insult, you don't really take the, you stood up for your culture, your caste group, family honor, so on and so forth, and that predict attitude towards violence against women, right? So caste-specific beliefs about gender are tied to female neglect and infanticide. This is the correlational data. I already know there is a behavior. I tried to see the cultural underpinnings for that behavior. So differential access to ecological resources shape beliefs about gender as well as son preferences. The more your cultural practices are tied to a resource question, like land resources, that's going to play an important role how you're going to treat your son or daughter. By the way, if you look at fishing communities, for a long time, historically, fishing communities have a much more egalitarian gender role because men fish and give the fish to the wives. Wives always sold the fish in traditional fishing villages. So women have a lot of power in those villages. And lo and behold, those areas also have a matrilineal system. So it's an interesting cultural correlation there. So we need to create an awareness about the cultural psychological reasons. So why these two caste groups connect their, why these caste groups behave in this particular way, how that is rooted in certain ecological relationship before we start an intervention, right? Social programs, they should focus on some of the intercaste marriages issue, because if you promote intercaste marriages, that reduces the dowry, right? That's an issue. Dowry is a major issue. Improving women's education is an important step, but the data is not very encouraging. What they found was the more educated the women are, they are more likely to invest on their on their sons more than on their daughters, right? So if you are more educated, you're likely to put all your resources on your son, not on the daughter. Can you guys think of a reason why it might be the case? Why somebody might, the more educated you are, the women are more likely to treat their sons more? Yes. Yes, you try to please his husband, but you also, I want you to step back and think. Those villages, there are probably 1.7 men for every one woman. So when I teach it to my class, I always say, it's like you need to go to Harvard to get married. You have to be extremely successful in those villages. The equivalent of India, right? You have to be extremely successful to get married. So all the moms have to do is put all the resources they have on their sons to make them successful, because it's a highly male-male competitive environment. Men have to compete with other men to get married. Unless you are successful, your chance of getting married is zero. So the moms have to put all their resources and energy on the sons, and that really creates an interesting dilemma if you are a developmentalist. Right? So empowerment is important, but there is an interesting dilemma how that's going to affect translation of the empowerment into better treatment of sons and daughters. Okay, so some serious implications. By 2020, they expect 28 million more males than females, which is a huge issue, and Valerie written about that. And in China, this figure will be 28 million. In Pakistan, it will be 3 to 5 million, right? Again, all those places, like Valerie says, have very budding, emerging democracies, right? The institutions are very weak already as a democratic institution. And more men hanging out, more problem, right? Testosterone level goes up, right? So we know a lot of data, both experimental data and the ethnographic data, that men, when they hang out together, the testosterone level goes up. You know the first thing after marriage happens to men? The testosterone level goes down. That's an interesting finding. So some people say testosterone level goes down, and also strongly correlated with creativity, right? If you're high in testosterone, you're also very creative. So there's an interesting trade-off. Okay. So these are, it's only one study. It's not replicated yet. Right. So group conflicts, Valerie talks about it. And also we have very interesting evidence of kidnapping of girls. Very huge number of prostitution rings in those villages because there are fewer women. And these are all the side effects. Whenever we do this study, people who have done work in the communities, we also collect survey for the community because they don't have the resources. So I collect data for the community. So we did a very basic focus group things. So what are the basic problems faced by the community? So they said, oh, there's prostitution a major issue, sexually transmitted diseases as an issue, but the community never thinks this is connected to the female infanticide or female neglect. They really don't see the connection, but they acknowledge high incidence of sexually transmitted diseases. We are also in the getting close to number 2 in the number of HIV infection in India. So people don't make those connections, right? It's very important as policy makers, people to see how these things go together. So I think some of the interventions, short-term intervention, monitor female fetuses at risk, like the kind of project they're doing. Women's education is important. Community education, all those data, how these things affect men's and women's life on the long run. And long-term effect is education empowerment, shifts in cultural practices, right? The idea that parents are going to stay only with sons or daughters, when you have only small families, maybe one child or two child, the culture has to deal with this shift, right? There are some popular movies and soap operas looking at those issues, right? So there are daughters who's taking care of their parents, things like that. Intercaste marriages reduces the amount of dowry or the marriage expenses. So that's another thing to focus. Current research, what I'm doing is, which will be my chapter 2 tomorrow, or 3 or 4, whenever you come, whichever section you are coming to. So what are the mental health consequences? What happened to these men and women in these communities? How it affects, the sex ratio affects their mental health, physical health. I have some data on this. How these communities also put pressure on the boys and girls, adolescents. The boys have to be so focused and successful, very goal-oriented. How they deal with those pressures. So I have data on that. I'm also looking at how this male by sex ratio leads to intercaste conflicts. So those areas where there are more men, they also get into trouble with the outgroup, the most stigmatized group, the Dalits. So the intergroup conflict is very intense in those places. So I'm trying to connect those dots together and show how female neglect is not only affecting the community, apart from the moral implications of the practice, it also affects both men and women's life and the harmony and the success of the community in terms of economically bringing new industries, which is a big thing now, right, in India. Thank you very much for listening. Take questions.